Felix, good morning.
Good morning, Tal.
Thanks for coming on to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
We haven't seen each other in about 2 years, I would say.
Yes.
Before we get cracking, not everyone has the same history as we have. I'd like you to start by telling us who you are, what do you do, and why do you do it?
So I'm Felix Beccar. I am originally from Argentina. Left my country when I was about 30 to study abroad. I went to do an MBA in France because I wanted to live in Europe. And at the time I was doing management consultancy and I thought I wanted to be a consultant forever. Like that's what I dreamed about. I said, if I want to be a consultant, let's go to one of the big ones in one big city in the world. And I was super passionate of the diversity that Europe has. So that's why I targeted what I thought at the time was the best kind of like consulting career I could get in an MBA. So I targeted INSEAD. I was lucky to get accepted. INSEAD has a 1-year program. It's an MBA in Europe, which is not very common in Argentina. Most of the Argentinian community who studies abroad goes to the US. So everyone was looking at me like, why are you going to Europe? But I still wanted to live in Europe. So I went with that, did this MBA. I got into Bain, which is one consultancy that I really appreciated, and in their office in London. I studied there. I did 3 years of consultancy and then moved to LinkedIn, where we happily met. Then I went into another company called Pipedrive, which is a tech SaaS company. And now I'm in another company called Mural, which is another SaaS tool. That's kind of like a give or take. So I've been in London for 8+ years, in Europe almost 9.5 years.
How different was the career you set on than what you thought it would be? Living in Argentina at the age of 30.
Yeah, I thought I was going, as I told you, like a consultant and working long hours and being in planes all the time. That doesn't change much, but still working long hours. At the time, I thought it was going to be very much like a linear career. Like I'm a very structured person, I like to think. So I'm always a guy who has like Excels for his personal life. And it's the guy who, in my group of friends, the one who like takes care of the expenses when you go on a vacation, right? We go on a weekend and I'm taking care of the budget, right? So I've been always kind of the person who's planning their life. And I thought it was going to be very linear, and also like life changes when I met my now wife. Like everything went differently to what I planned as well, and in a good way, of course. In case you're listening, so planning is great, and I think it sets you a direction where you want to head. But also I learned to be a little bit more nimble and move out of that kind of like Excel for my life into different kind of like places.
What personal Excel files do you have? What do you monitor on these Excel files?
I monitor way less more than what I used to. So when I was a consultant, you're all day in Excel, and I don't know why, but you try to apply that to your personal time. At some point, I was tracking everything I spent on a month-on-month basis. Maybe it had to do when I just arrived into London. London is one of the most expensive cities in the world. I was super worried, and so I was tracking that. But now today I just track like I use Excel for, I don't know, like a holiday planning, but very like sporadically, not as often as I used to.
Okay, so
I moved away from that.
it's part of being nimble.
It's a healthy relationship with Excel. Yeah.
It's knowing how to do it when you need, but just not being as dependent.
Exactly.
Fair enough. So there's plenty of things that wanna, in the words of Jeff Winner, double click on. The work as a consultancy, the transition into LinkedIn and startups. These are some of the themes we'd wanna cover. Before we go any deeper into those, what are your motivations in work? What do you hope to get out of work, except for money to be living in London and provide for your family?
I like a couple of things. One is impact on what I do. So I don't want to be part of like a massive machine where my work doesn't get to be seen by me or by others, right? I don't want to be in a place where nobody or I cannot see what I do. That's number one, probably. Impact is important for me. The second is people and creating a team, building a team, working with people I appreciate, I learn from, or people that complement me and I get also some energy from. Above, to the side, and below, right? Like 360 team energy. I started to think more about energy in the last couple of years. Like, what is this person giving me and what I am giving to this person? And energy feels like a word that describes pretty well what I mean by that. And third, I think, is the learning. Like, it goes a little bit with the other two, but I like to learn new things all the time. I'm curious, and I don't like when I'm stuck and not learning. So those are mainly the three things I look for.
I think impact is a theme that comes back from a lot of people who have experience in big companies, the consultancies, the LinkedIn's of the world.
Yeah.
There's so much to get from working in these companies, amazing experiences, amazing people. You learn so much. And then there's a point where like, okay, now I can actually give something back to the world rather than execute. So I think the impact theme, I know personally, impact was a huge driver at leaving LinkedIn. So I can see where this is coming from. And we'll talk a bit about building a team in a second. I want to talk about consultancy. What was your relationship like with your managers, with your team? Kind of bring us into this world, because when people are thinking their careers, consultancies, startups, corporations, these are kind of like the big propellants for people's careers. And walk us through a day in the life.
Well, I would say like consultancy gave me a lot of like tools under my belt, as they say here in the British say that phrase a lot, that idiom. I would strongly recommend consultancy for like earlier in your career, right? I may have stayed more than probably I should have now in hindsight. I had the benefit and the curse of starting in consulting when I just left university in a small boutique consultancy in Argentina where I grew up, and that gave me an exposure to what is consulting like. But I always felt that it wasn't a McKinsey, you know what I mean? So that's what I wanted to go into Bain so much, because I needed that stamp in my CV, I thought, which in hindsight it also helps me even today. So I think consulting is a great learning path. For me, it wasn't like forever. Like, I needed to move away from it. I learned a lot, and you asked me around that day in the life. And day is very hard to say, but normally you work in projects with very large corporations who are undergoing some level of change or leadership, questioning something, and they need external help, right? It's called management consultancy because you're helping management, right? It sounds obvious, but many people don't know that. And it could be like a big telecommunications company that, I don't know, they need to see if they close a country or not. Internally, that kind of like leadership team may not be in agreement and say, okay, let's defer this decision in a way to an external party who is fully capable about doing analysis, doing all the scenarios, capturing benchmarks and data to back it up. And they will come back to us for a recommendation we can take to the board, and the board can decide. That's kind of like, in a nutshell, what most of the projects entailed. Different levels of impact, different industries and whatnot. So therefore, the type of work you do is, like, going back to my impact question, is pretty significant. You're working with leaders in large corporations. And here in the UK, like, the biggest companies in the world are employing companies like Bain and McKinsey and BCG and others, right? So it's very interesting, the work you're doing. And but it's also very demanding.
It's a huge confidence builder. Young people who are coming out of working for consultancies, they have a sense of, they're not afraid of senior stakeholders. They're pretty experienced product managers. They learned that they can learn pretty much any industry in a short period of time.
Yes.
Huge confidence builder, huh?
Yes, and also no, I would say, sometimes it can crush your confidence as well, because these consultancies have kind of like a cookie cutting way of doing things, and if you don't fit the mold, you could be like seen as, this guy is not performing. Or I had projects where I didn't perform very well, and I'm happy to say that because nobody says it, and I feel there's this level of, I don't know if it is like ego or what else. I had projects where I didn't get along with the manager, I didn't get along with my team, or I didn't agree in the way we were tackling problems or recommending stuff to our clients. I kind of kept crashing with my manager, and at some point he's the manager, we do it, but therefore my review wasn't amazing, and that's okay. I learned from that and I moved on. Overall, I think I did a good job, but also like for some periods of time over there, like my confidence was very, very low. And you get stressed and you get like, oh, I'm working 80 hours a week, 90 hours a week, weekends, I'm leaving my family aside. And then I get like this bad review and this constant feedback flow that gets to you. And if you're not, as you say, very like with a thick skin, you can take feedback in a way that can crush your confidence. So I would agree that overall it gives you confidence. Like if you get out of it on the positive side of the equation, you're very much kind of like strong to take on any challenges. But also, if you end up in the wrong side of the equation, you may also be quite kind of like lost into what are you good at, what are you not good at, and what do you want to do next.
Yeah. A band I like, they have a song, and one of the lyrics is, "The secret to a happy ending is knowing when to roll the credits." And
Yes.
in many ways it makes sense, because the way you live one work sets you up for the next one.
Yeah.
And if you live on the low, it's very hard to build yourself back up and show up the way you want to be presenting yourself to the next interview. So I take that fully. There's something about the consultancy world where you're exposed to very senior decision makers within large companies that otherwise you wouldn't get exposed to. And I think being able to perform or be on the same pitch as them is quite remarkable. You were working for LinkedIn, you were a senior manager at the account management team for the marketing solutions part. The hierarchy was as flat as LinkedIn was and as open as it was. There was still a few levels between you and the senior decision makers, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that at the beginning was a little bit, okay, so I'm reporting to this person, who reporting to this person, who reporting to this person, and that person probably was the one I was working with before, right? So I was maybe like 4 or 5 levels below the type of clients I had before. So at the beginning it was a bit of a shock. So this is my remit. So UK for advertising, for blah, 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 blah. It's like, and you're the part of account management, you're not sales. And I said, okay. So at the beginning, like, to be honest, I didn't know what I signed up for. Like, I didn't really understand what I was entering into until maybe a month into my job.
And it's funny because coming from consultancy, you'd think you already figured it all out. You know how big companies work.
Exactly. And that was like what I was about to tell you before is you think you know what each person at a company does, right? You say, oh, sales, those guys go and do sales, and oh, and finance, they do that, and planning, they do that. But you don't know. And you don't know until you're there and you work with those people what those tasks are. I even find myself now when I'm interviewing people for roles and they come from consultancy, they are very vague in the way they describe what they want to do. So what do you want to do? And they, oh, I would like to do like sales and maybe business development and strategy, and I'm very hands-on and very strategic, and I did a bit of M&A. And also, wait, you told me like 15 different roles in a sentence. Where do you want to go? So I think I don't blame them, because I've been there too, but being on the other end shows you how little you know about a particular job. You may know about other things, how to analyze, how to look at data, prepare a model and do a diligence and whatnot. But when it comes down to who does what at a company, from a consulting angle, I think you know very little.
Yeah. It's funny what you mentioned about the vagueness, because people come into a job interview, they want to get a bullseye. Yes. I want to say that what I want to do is exactly what you're looking for, and there's no chance I'll know. You know, it's a startup, there's very little information available to me. A few weeks ago, I was getting back into the job market, and a friend suggested I'd reach out to this guy. He's setting up a fund right now, and he's looking for someone to operate it with him. So I called this guy, a venture capitalist, super, super sharp, to the point. I'm like, can we meet for coffee? He goes, no, we should speak on the phone first. I'm like, okay. Like this guy, guards his time. So I call him and he's like, okay, so tell me who you are. And I tell him what I've done. I've done operations and commercial and da 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 da. And he goes, hold on. Listen, my wife is on the other line. I'm going to hang up with you. I'm going to call her back. And when I call you back, I want you to tell me exactly what you did without the bullshit. What do you mean without the bullshit? I don't know. You said operations, commercial. It doesn't mean anything to me. What did you do? So I'm like, okay, it's going to be this type of a conversation. Yeah. So I like being specific about it. You think you'd be minimizing your chances of success in a job interview if you're being super specific.
Yeah.
But I think maybe in a way you're also setting yourself up for success, because if they want you to do something you've never done before, that's okay. They need to know that you're able to do other things, or they need to know you haven't done this before. And get a chance to give you the reins to do it. So the vagueness, we'll go back to it because you also do operations now, and
yes.
Operations is highly transferable between industries, between roles, between seniority. So we'll talk about that in a second. You mentioned impact, which is measurable and tangible, but you also mentioned energy. So energy is very, very abstract.
Yeah.
Having seen you facilitate work among your peers as managers, but also manage a team, you moved very seamlessly in the different contexts, which I found really amazing. And when you said that you found yourself clashing with a manager, I couldn't even imagine what it looks like.
Well, I can show you, but yeah, I guess like there are certain principles or certain, I don't know how, values, I don't know how to name them, but there's certain aspects of how you should be dealing with problems that if I don't see in the other person, if I don't see someone applying the same kind of like thought process as I would, with the same values and with the same approach to problems when they arise, I don't get identified with that person anymore. And that sometimes gives me like a yellow card. You mentioned that I make a lot of analogies with football. I may have seen it once and it's a yellow card for me, but if I see it again, it's a red card. Wow. And once I see a red card, you're out of the pitch. It's very hard for me to earn or gain that trust again.
It comes up a lot in our conversation around startup nightmares. And when we ask people how to qualify a startup, which we'll also talk about because you've done a few now, then one of the things that come up, and actually our producer, Yaski, said it, he says, the most important thing when you qualify a startup is the intention of the people behind it.
Yeah.
And it goes the same with micro levels, with decisions. So what is the intention? Where are they coming from? I can accept a decision that's different than what I would have made if I understand the values behind it. It's not an easy conversation to have, especially not with people who are higher up than you. Going to your manager, so what are you trying to achieve by doing ABC? Like, they don't owe you an answer. Yeah. Okay, so that was Bain. 3 years, ups and downs, left it in a positive trajectory, and then you moved on to LinkedIn.
Yes.
First month trying to orientate yourself and see what is going on. Was this your first management role with LinkedIn?
Yeah, I was managing small teams at Bain, what they call a case team leader, which is when these projects are happening. Bain has this role where there's a team. Of course, there's a team in a project, very small teams of 3, 4, 5 people. And there's someone managing the team of analysts or the more junior people. This is the case team leader. And there's someone like managing the relationship with the client, the manager or the partner. So I was managing in small groups for like 6 to 9 months before moving to LinkedIn. But LinkedIn was the first one where I actually had a full team under my responsibility. Yes.
So new role, new company, new country.
Yeah.
That's a lot to take in.
Yeah, they normally recommend you to do one thing at a time, 1 degree of freedom. But I didn't take that advice very literally. It was a lot to take on. Luckily, LinkedIn has a very good culture, and you know this, and it helped me a lot to feel at home early on. The level of stress I was feeling at Bain and deliverables every day or whatever, like at Bain, I sent an email to my manager every night with like the bullet points. Basically, it's all in bullet points in consulting. Like you talk in bullet points, you send emails in bullet points. I think bullet points maybe were created by a McKinsey or something. So at the end of the day, I sent kind of like a recap. Hey, this is what we learned today. The client said blah blah blah. Next steps for tomorrow, ABC. That was my the last thing I did before I closed my laptop at midnight or whatever in consulting. When I go into LinkedIn, I speak to my then manager and say, okay, what's kind of like the output you would expect on a day-to-day basis? Do you want like a daily email with the bullets? And so she was like, what? What email? Like, I'm sitting there. What do you mean? Like, why an email? And then I say, okay, like a weekly email? It's like, okay, if it helps you, do it, but I don't care. I was like, oh, this is different. So a lot of learning, a lot of like becoming a bit more nimble on what was actually my job. Like, what did I have to do? Just manage people? Like, I had a team of 8 or so. Is it just like keep them happy and see what they're up to, solve their issues, be a mentor? And what is it? Like, what do I have to do? So that's the first month I was telling you, like, what exactly do I need to do here? Is it just make sure these 8 people are happy, they're growing, they're delivering what they need to deliver on versus these specs? Or do I need to do something else? I started to do projects. I started to do things on the side because I thought that was my way of proving impact. Not just managing people, for me, managing was like, okay, yeah, I manage them, but give me something to me, like something of my own. So that was my first kind of like couple of months at LinkedIn.
It's like as a hustler, you do work on the business and in the business, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, you just work on the business.
Yeah.
You don't have to go on client calls. You don't have to go into the campaign manager to tweak stuff. You don't have to go back to the deal desk and fight with them.
Yeah.
Just make sure that these folks are looked after.
Yeah.
And also one other thing that happens in these big companies that are going through hyper growth is that you don't really have the time to manage. You hire so well and you're pretty busy. So you don't have the time to actually spend shadowing sessions with your directs and stuff like that. It's a completely different style. The balance between autonomy and specs of the role is quite peculiar, I found.
Yeah. I also like within a team, you always have a group of people who are super happy, super driven, ambitious. They know what they're doing and they want to grow and whatever. You have a group of like maybe in the middle who are like, yeah, it's okay. It's a job, whatever. And then you always have a longer tail of this is not for me. I hate my role. Like, why did I sign up for this? Or lunch here is crap and I need my holidays. And so people call it the millennials or whatever. I don't care what like generation you're in, but I had a lot like when I inherited this team at the beginning, half of the team pretty much was unhappy with their role. So my role started to be like understanding what they wanted to do. If this was not the role for them, maybe help them find their next play in LinkedIn's world, or like, I don't know, work with them to see what's the best possible way. So that was also different to what was I used to. At Bain, as I told you before, like these people are super driven and ambitious. They sign up for something, they work very hard, and they never ever, like if they want to leave, there is an issue, like HR takes care of that. Like the manager never has to coach someone out of the business. That barely happens. And I never heard that, but it's kind of like they outsource, or I don't know if it happens at all, but the managers are just focused on the clients and delivering the work. Maybe you have mentors and mentees. Yes, that could work. But on a day-to-day basis, there's very little time in consulting to talk about kind of like your maybe this is not the right role for you. Because you sign up for it. You know what you're signing up for and you go all in.
Yeah.
So it's unlikely you're 1 month in or 1 year in and you say, I don't like the lunch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
When I got the job with LinkedIn, I thought I'll be there forever. I mean, the dream job, great culture, great team, super talented folks. Between okay to good money, depending on how you did, how was your quarter. But very quickly, there's like kinks in the armor. And some people, I don't like the lunch. I can't believe they've taken our plastic bottles away. Now I have to go to the kitchenette to pour myself a glass of water. Can't take and then sometimes it's bigger. Sometimes it's like, I want to progress faster. I want to earn a little bit more money. It seems like nothing is ever enough.
Yeah.
Is that something you saw more of in LinkedIn versus Bain?
No, I think like even like I suffer from that as well. Like you're always looking for your next thing and see like what's your career path looking like. I guess we're all in like trying to be as best as we can, and sometimes you question yourself, do I have the title I should have? Shouldn't I be like a senior manager and not a manager? I want to be a director. It's like, what does that mean? Like, why? Why do we push ourselves so hard or so like? I think even like myself now, I'm called a VP of operations. Is that better, a director of operations or head of operations or a COO? Like, what's the difference? So I'm now trying, although it's not easy, to like focus on the story. Like, what did you do at this company? What were the things? What are the bullet points you're going to write in your CV after you leave this job? What are those things? And that's, I think, much more for me meaningful than if it is a senior or not a senior manager in my title.
Now we're getting into a more unstructured world, which is the startup world,
Yeah,
where titles don't mean anything,
yeah,
where job descriptions are mostly made up. The connection between them and what happens in reality is very loose, if at all. And even if it exists, it changes every quarter or every 6 months or every round. So we'll get to talking about that. Before we move on, I just want to spend a few more minutes on being a middle management in a
yeah,
company like LinkedIn. You have a lot of responsibility because it's the well-being of some of the high performing, pretty demanding people. You have to catch up. You have to
yeah.
they have to respect you.
Yes,
Even though you came in as a manager, you've never done their role before,
exactly.
so you have to get them to respect you. What did you feel and your direct respect and kind of appreciation?
I think I was always very transparent with them. So I told them, look, I don't know what you do. Like, I don't know your role. I want to learn. Show me. I did a few shadowing sessions, to your point. Maybe not as much as I should have, but I was trying to understand the role. Oh, okay. So that's a CPC. And what's a CPM? Oh, I get it. Okay. So this campaign is more like producing more value for us than this one. Oh, okay, great, I get it. It took me I had never done advertising before going into managing a team of people who were delivering value to advertisers, right? So I didn't work with agencies or nothing. So at the beginning it was like very much, you know what, I want to learn. And the ones more like maybe more senior or more back to my energy point, the more empathetic of my team members were the ones who are, you know what, this guy can, maybe he doesn't know a thing about how to run a marketing campaign or marketing dollars, but he can help us in another way. He can be structured with our planning. He can be someone who helps me progress my career or make better presentations to my clients or whatever. So it took me a bit of time, but I think by being honest was the first thing I did. And the ones who appreciated, I think, were the ones that we got along more with. So I'm quite transparent, as you can see. Like I will be always like telling you what I'm lacking, and I think people appreciate that.
It comes across. It comes across in your writing. It came across in your management style. I'm wondering if you ever had to pay a cost for that, because transparency in that regard also means, listen, guys, I'm a manager in this company. They call the shots, and our wiggle room, your promotion, your raise, the priorities, the size of your book, you're limited in what you can give them back.
Yeah, true. At the beginning, especially, but if you have clear kind of like path and a clear measure of the impact you can bring, so then the leadership starts to look at you for advice, right? If you're telling like, you know what, this guy is driving a lot of revenue because he's doing X, Y, and Z different than all the others, so his clients are happier and therefore spending more. And if the manager wasn't there bringing that up, the leadership of the company would have seen that. So let's recognize that person and make sure that person is kind of like elevated and that learning gets spread around the company. So we're all doing what he does best. So I guess like the job as a manager of course is kind of managing the day to day, but it's also kind of like unpicking what is working in your team, elevating that to leadership and say, okay, this guy in the Netherlands is amazing. He's doing X, Y, and Z. Show the other guy in Germany how to run 120 campaigns at a time, because he's stretched, he is not. So what's the learning there? So if you're able to detect insights and bring them to the table, you started to be seen as someone trustworthy and someone who's adding value rather than just having one-on-ones and with your team, right? So that's, I think, when you start to earn the respect of the leadership, and then your team starts to see that the work they do gets recognized, and therefore they can trust their manager as well.
So one of the biggest cards you can play as a manager, even if you're very limited in the changes you can do, is recognition.
Recognition for the right things, right? So what I don't like is managers just pushing for their teams because, oh, my team needs a raise, they're very unhappy, and let's give them a 10% increase. Yes, okay, why? Like, tell me why. What are they doing? What are they doing differently? Or why do they deserve this and not? Like, if the manager is able to think like the owner and of the business, the leadership will see that and will appreciate that kind of like level of kind of like ownership, right? What I see sometimes in junior managers is the fact that they just need to fight for their team. That's what they meant to be doing. And as a manager myself, sometimes I actually said, no, she doesn't deserve a break, or he doesn't deserve a raise, or maybe he's not that good for that role. So I'll find a way for him. Maybe he needs to leave, and that's okay. But it's not fighting for all your team because you're meant to be fighting. It's just unpicking what works, saying what doesn't work, and what's your plan to solve that.
That's honesty on one level up.
Well, I guess like you need to think of your team as this is like, again, going back to football, this is my national team of 11, right? In football, it's 11 people, or soccer for Americans. Like, who do I want to have here as my number 5, my number 10, my goalkeeper, right? If you see that the goalkeeper is not very well, it's like you need to be talking to your board of directors, say like, look, we need a new goalkeeper because this person is not delivering. But you don't say like all the team needs to fly in first class next time we go to the US because they need to. No, it doesn't really work like that.
You mentioned doing this differentiation, a coach style, understanding that each person has who they are, but there's also the role in the company or the team, and that's a big difference.
Yes.
And you mentioned building a team. Now, the teams that we're discussing right now, account managers, salespeople, are not organic teams that are working together towards an outcome per se. They're working together to create a better outcome for the company, but their collaboration is limited. One person works the UK, one person works the Netherlands, one person works France. So how do you build a team of folks whose overlapping areas is quite limited? How do you create collaboration when they don't actually have to work together?
Yes, it is not easy, but you need to find the common traits of the job. And we all, at that point, they all had clients, right? They all had advertisers. They're all looking at LinkedIn as a platform to advertise. Okay, great. What's their role as an account manager? Is to make sure that the customers, the agencies and the end customers are happy with their advertising spend. Okay, great. How can we make them happy? Okay, proving value. Okay, are we proving value all as a team in the same way? I found that someone in Spain was delivering value in another way than the one in the UK. What's good in that versus this? And let's try to kind of like streamline how we present delivering value to our customers and pick what is working from the team and elevate it, again, to my point earlier, and make sure the best way of proving value is spread and that learning is spread across the team. So you need to find what, like the Venn diagram, and you need to find the common areas and then work on that to what is working, make it the norm. That's the way we do it. Like what that person did in the Netherlands, she did that for a client and presented, I don't know, a quarter business review in a way that is best in class. Okay, let's unpick that and share it with the rest of the team.
And that's setting up a standard to get people to elevate to that standard could be an amazing team building way for companies that work with highly motivated individuals, which is the case for LinkedIn and many other companies. Super motivated. Did you ever come across situations in which over motivation worked against your team?
I wouldn't say so. Over motivation, I didn't see it as a negative thing. Maybe what could happen is that someone works very hard on something that is not really, you're not in line with them in how much value that is adding, right? And it could be up to opinions, I get that. But imagine someone internally trying to, I had occasions where someone was very focused on internal programs and internal marketing initiatives. And so how internally we could do something. Whereas their clients were suffering and the level of attention, right? So it was like, okay, you're motivated on something that is internal for the company to become better, which I see value of that. But I only want you to do that if your core is being done right, right? Your core is a customer facing role. Your customers need to be happy. They need to be very much like overly wowed on what we're delivering. Once you get that right, you get to do special projects internally. And sometimes some people who are not maybe in the right role, to my point earlier, only want to do the special projects. I only want to do, I don't know, education classes for agencies who don't know anything about LinkedIn. I get that, it's important, but you have a patch, you have a book of business you need to take care of first. So I wouldn't call it over motivation. I would call it motivation on the things that probably didn't matter as much to the business.
Yeah. Another aspect of motivation in such companies, you enter a new company, a new world, you don't know the progression cadence. How soon will you get a promotion? How soon will you get a raise? What does it take to get promoted in that organization? And I remember after 6 months with LinkedIn, I was an account manager. I set my manager down for one of our one-to-ones. And I'm like, okay, when are we talking about my next play? When do I become senior? When do I get promoted? And he's like, whoa. You've been here, what, 5 months now? I'm like, yes, but I'm killing it. I'm like, da, 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 da. He goes, hold on, hold your horses. And he explicitly said, in a nice way, don't be a millennial.
Yeah.
I'm here. I got your back. When it's time to promote you, I'll promote you even before you ask for it. But for now, trust me that I'm taking you to the right place and just, do your work, be patient. You've only been in the company for 5 months.
Yeah.
Like you're the latest person to join the team.
Yeah.
There's people ahead of you in the line. And fair enough, people were better than me, more experienced, more worthy of a promotion. So I took my time gradually, but I was growing impatient because, like you said earlier, I thought I should have senior next to my name. I thought I should be doing this or that. I was very worried about my title and my story of progression. And the company, a huge company, 10,000 people, were going in a different pace than I was going. And my manager's role then was to help me pace myself, not to be overmotivated, not to kill myself over a space of the first year just to get ahead, because there is a limit to how fast you can progress within those big systems.
Yeah.
What advice would you give people who are in the earlier stages of the work, first 3 to 5 years? They wanna explode. They wanna get promoted every year, and they're working for big vessels that move a little slower.
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, get the core right and nail it. What is your task? It's customer facing. Okay, make sure your customers absolutely love working with you. If it is, whatever it is, you're in a deal desk and you need to handle tickets, okay, crush it. If you're in customer support, make sure customers rate you over whatever you need to do as your core, work your ass off for that and make sure you're absolutely crushing your core. And everything else, whatever is a distraction, wait. Don't start from fancy projects early on, because you got hired for something and you need to do that job really, really well for you to be considered to take the next role. Sometimes I feel that junior team members are very desperate to show how smart they are or how good they are or whatever they learned somewhere in, I listened to this podcast called Startup Nightmares or whatever, that they are trying to bring the extra 10% in every conversation. And I say, okay, I get it, but just do your core fucking great, right? I'm sorry I curse a lot, but I need it.
It's an important point to make.
But I feel that like this, all this like name dropping, now we can go to my role maybe later, but there is sometimes a new customer and it's a new customer. Okay, there's always a new customer, but I mean, there's a new lead coming from a customer and the SDR says, oh, I know someone at Oracle. Well, Oracle is how many people? 80,000, 120,000? It's like, okay, great. You know someone, probably not the decision maker in this deal, but just respond to this person, make sure they're happy with the product, make sure they understand the value we provide, make sure they buy if that's the best for them. But I don't care, you know someone, you know what I mean? So just don't get distracted. That's basically the way of summarizing it.
I would want to go to distractions and your roles in startups, but one last question, because I think it's key. As a manager, you can't report everything. You don't know everything your team is doing. You don't report everything that you know that your team is doing.
Yeah.
And the decision to get people ahead, promote them, is actually based on much more reduced and distilled data set than the 110% value that this person is creating.
Yes.
What are the things you bring to the table when discussing the promotion or progression of one of your team members? What do you advise, people who are being managed to know about how they're being talked about?
Yeah. So for this, although it sounds a bit boring, but for this, you need to have some sort of like guideline, or ideally, I wouldn't call it a job spec, but I would call like something like a career path document that states what are the things that is expected from this role. At LinkedIn, we built this over time. At the beginning, it was a first draft, but then over time, it got a bit better. And we had like 3 core pillars. We call it like leadership, leverage, and results. And then within those pillars, for each kind of like seniority, we had certain behaviors we wanted to see. And even if you go to a smaller company or a big company, whatever the size of your business is, try to get those in writing and agree and share that with your team member as early as you can. And say, okay, you're a junior account manager. I expect you on the leadership piece, although I don't expect you to be a leader, but you need to start showing me that you can lead. And by that, I mean, you need to, for instance, lead our internal team meetings. That's the best, like maybe the best way they can do at the beginning of their career. Just run our internal team meetings, find a speaker every other week of who can come in and speak about something interesting for the rest. I don't know, collate some insights, share with the group, start to kind of like monitor that and test that over time. So although like for junior roles, sometimes it could be like, what are they asking me to do? You need to start seeing like in football again, like you go and see, like try to nail a goal in front of that goalkeeper. What you see is like you start to see the behavior of that striker early on. Even though the goalkeeper might be the Premier League keeper, you want to see that junior person the potential to be a leader or the potential to be someone who can leverage stuff. So over the course of the quarter or the half of the year, you keep like referring back to those bullet points and say, how are you doing versus, you actually, I didn't see much of you on the leadership front, and ideally you pick this up during the half, not at the end of the review. I would like you to show me that you can run team meetings and you can run meetings with junior client members and you can run meetings with senior client members. So I want to see that path. So I tend to have that conversation. And then when I write the review, I use those same bullets as my team made fun of me. My reviews were very, very long. But I just copied the bullet point entirely and just paste it in the review. And say like, okay, this is the behavior expected, and these are the times where I didn't see it or where I did see it, with examples. You need examples because people otherwise forget. That's
another thing that is a big deal for a manager is attention. Like you need to manage at the scale that you can provide the type of attention that helps those people promote. Because if you're managing them and you don't really pay attention to what they are doing, you can't coach them well.
Yeah.
You can't tell them, listen, here you've done A instead of doing B. Doing B would have gotten you a little bit further. So attention and recognition are two of your currencies. What would you say about personal brand for young employees? So fine, they're nailing their core right. How much does the extracurricular activity play a role when making a decision on promotion and progression?
I would say try to know or think what is the thorn that your boss has in their feet, right? What is bugging your boss? What's the issue that is top of mind for him or her, and therefore leadership, right? Is it we're not growing fast enough? Is it we have too many costs? Or is it our T&E budget is gone? Or what is it? And with that, have like a solution-oriented approach and say, hey, I know that the issue we're having right now in this quarter is that we're not growing a lot. I worked over last night with a couple of ideas. I spoke to a few team members. I think there are 2 or 3 things we could pilot. What do you think? If you want me, I can progress further, but I just wanted to share like an initial thought. Because as a manager, you get a lot of like random stuff and random noise that is to not say it in another word, so to avoid the cursing.
I'm laughing because I probably flooded my managers with so much of those things.
But you want people to solve your problems, right? You want to get rid of like emails that you have in your inbox, or like wherever you're writing your to-dos, you want to cross them out. You want stuff to get out of your plate. If you have someone in your team that is coming with ideas on how to cross out those things in your list, that's gold, right? So if someone says, we're not growing enough, so I have these 3 ideas, or we could test this pilot, or I talked to this customer who actually are thinking about an annual deal with us because of it, that's amazing. So someone who can think ahead of the game, nailing the core always, but if they're also able to solve the leadership problems in a solution-oriented approach, that's, I think, takes you to the outstanding category.
That's amazing to hear. So nailing the core, making sure you do the simple stuff well, don't skip stages. Like leading, when I gave the task of leading team meetings to some of my directs, they're like, why we're 4 people here? You're obviously the manager. Like, why do I need to do that? They didn't see sometimes the value of being able to do that, and they didn't recognize this as an opportunity to put themselves forward as managers. Like, I drew so much comfort and confidence from seeing one of them at the head of the table, running the show, keeping the agenda, keeping the times, holding others accountable. It's a 30-minute instance that can tell you a lot about a person's character and potential. So highly advisable. And then, like you said, identify what's important to your manager. Of course, there's what you need to do to not get fired. Fair enough. That's the core. And there's what does your manager need to do to get ahead? Is that a legitimate question in a one-to-one, saying like, Felix, I have my book. I'm pretty much on top of it. The customers are all being taken care of. How can I be of further help?
Yeah, I think like asking the question, like what's top of mind for you? What's top of mind for your managers? Like what is being discussed at the leadership level? What's the biggest issue they see in the business today? I think that's fair. And again, going back to my transparency, I've been always quite transparent with the team. I say like, look, we're considering moving this to that. Of course, there's confidential stuff, but whenever I could share ideas, thoughts, I wanted the buy-in early on from my team. Not only the buy-in, but also the input. As you say, I don't know enough of what is a day-to-day. And we have this idea of, I don't know, deprecating this product line or launching a new type of motion, whatever. And I need some validation, at least from my team and then from our customers. So my team was a very good source of inspiration or like testing. So I would have the conversation. I would ask the question to your manager, what's top of mind for you? How can I help you?
So you wouldn't consider it intrusive?
Not at all. No, I would appreciate it.
Last question on that, because it's a huge part, not of just our roles as managers and but of the workforce, and that's employee retention.
Yeah.
So we have the average tenure is 18 to 24 months, 24 months if you're lucky. first day of induction with LinkedIn, they say, you're bound to leave eventually. Let's make our time together worthwhile for both sides. Did you ever have an employee that you loved but couldn't retain within the constraints of your role?
Yeah, that happens. And they left for better opportunities or personal reasons, or their partner went back to Paris, or yes, I had several examples.
And did you ever have the examples where good employees that you really loved working with found themselves coming to you with an opportunity, saying, "Listen, Felix, I love you, I love the team, but I've got this opportunity. I have to pursue it," and you knew it was the wrong decision to make for them because they were this close for a promotion, because you know something about that company that they don't, or that role?
No, not because of promotion or like they were close to getting a raise or nothing like that. I sometimes question like their own kind of like assessment of their own capabilities versus, so example, I feel like I want to move to this company because I want to be a senior manager here or whatever, and run I don't know, a customer success organization. I say, okay, are you ready for that? Why do you want to do that? And sometimes I maybe disagreed with the decisions they took, but at the end of the day, if they are, maybe I was wrong, of course, but also like sometimes you need to hit your own wall to learn it. So go ahead and do it. One of the things we can talk about later is I value much more the journey than the end result, of course. And if a startup doesn't work, but you were there for 9 months or 2 years or whatever, I'm sure you left that startup better than you would have been if you stayed in your previous role. So I would encourage people to just do the experience. If they feel like it, go. I would never try to kind of like hold them back.
So let's move on to talking about hitting walls. The startup world is all about hitting walls. Sometimes you break them, sometimes you climb over them, sometimes the wall collapses on your head. At some point, even though you've progressed within LinkedIn, you're super, super appreciated, you decided to move on.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that transition.
So I was with LinkedIn for 3 years, and I was really enjoying my time there. Like I was getting to a point where like I had an amazing relationship with my manager. She became a very strong mentor to me, coaching me, making me step up my role, become a leader. I have an amazing relationship with the sales leader, which was like my partner in crime. We became friends. I went on the weekends to his place, and so and I had built a team, and I was starting to build managers underneath me who were also people that I hired with the idea of making them managers, and that was already happening. I went a bit of like crazy and hired people who were maybe not the perfect type of account managers, and those were proving to be very successful. I think I was pretty in a very good spot. But at some point I became a bit bored, to be honest. Like my job was very like, honestly, I was having fun, and I had an amazing team. I got along with my team very well, but I got bored of not having to solve major problems, which I like doing. Like problem solving for me in the face of a consultant or in the face of a startup, problem solving for me is pretty big, right? Going back to the impact point. So at some point I became a bit bored, and I started to look around. I couldn't find anything that was worthwhile leaving LinkedIn. Then I saw someone at LinkedIn leaving to become the CRO of a startup. And I had worked with her very briefly over a few projects. And she was another type of leader, very well established in what she did. And she was like, look, I'm going to do this CRO role for this startup that is booming. I need someone to be my right-hand person and run the numbers of the business, run the planning, all the stuff that I really liked. And that was like a bet. But I decided to take it. And it was not easy. I was getting along like very well with everyone at LinkedIn. I had won a small award. I had like everything was like perfect. I don't know, but I just took the chance.
Yeah, you took a chance. It sounds like people work their entire life to be exactly where you were when you left.
Yeah.
So then you joined
I'm,
Pipedrive.
I'm happy. I'm happy I did it. Like, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. I was in my comfort zone. I had the recognition internally as a manager and as a team member, or like my peers. I got along. But I said, like, okay, off to a new challenge. And I went to Pipedrive, which is a CRM that I didn't know about before, and was undergoing like a leadership transformation. I decided to join their newly created London office. So it was a new challenge as well. Of when I joined LinkedIn, was already like, I don't know, 6,000 people or so. When I joined Pipedrive, was like 200 and something or 300. And in London, like I was like the second or third employee in London. So completely different story. We were in a co-working space all around the table, right? I felt like more like, this is kind of like what I like doing.
It's a bit of a hustle. You get to see the impact. You feel important. Probably a straight line to one of the executives or the founders.
Yeah.
It sounds like a 200 people startup that's already setting up their international locations is people who know what they're doing. Probably some PR going on. There's some positive momentum, hiring for C-suites. I could see the win for you. You know, you're coming in as a VP, like reporting to the decision makers. Da 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 da. What is it like to work for a 200 people startup?
Yeah, it's very different, of course, than a 6,000 public company, for sure. Every day is very, very different. Everything, going back to my point of who does what, and at LinkedIn, you said, okay, there's a team of financial planning and analysis. It's a team of like, I don't know, 15 people, right? And here, when you go to a startup of 250,000 employees, there's no one in financial planning analysis. There's half a person doing that, maybe, right? So it's not like, oh, take that to FP&A. Like, well, what is FP&A? It doesn't exist here. You need to kind of like change your mindset and say, okay, the finance function is 2 people, 4 people, and this is how they do it. They're all maybe generalists, and they all do stuff at the beginning. They're all doing a little bit of everything. So you need to adapt a bit your style as well. And even yourself, you're no longer very, as I told you before, you're not the covering this market and this line of business. You're like, you have a wider impact, and therefore you need to wear different hats. So you need to be very nimble, and sometimes be like very hands-on on something, and sometimes be super strategic and very hands-off. So you have the full spectrum of things to do.
So coming from a role which was really well defined into an unstructured space.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with the executives and the founders.
Yeah. It wasn't easy, especially at the beginning, because people who come from product or engineering backgrounds normally have very good understanding, or normally no, they do have a very good understanding on what's a tech lead, what's a product manager, what's a QA, what's like these roles are, of course, well defined in a product driven organization. Pipedrive had half of the team globally was engineering, right? So I was new to the role, and the function didn't exist. So there wasn't business operations per se or strategy. So they were all asking me, what is business operations? So funnily enough, like the term doesn't even help, right? It doesn't say I'm compliance. It doesn't say exactly what you do. So which is made my job a little bit difficult. So at the beginning, I spent some time like with them, and they were all asking me, so what do you do? And I was answering these questions, and always they were going back to, but why do you sit in marketing? Because your boss is a CMO. Well, she had this role at LinkedIn as a partner, so she decided to create this function here. I was like, okay, that sounds weird. So at the beginning, I got to earn my trust. I think after 2-3 months, I was there, like with the leadership team. They're also like very much. There were a lot of like co-founders in the team already, in the leadership team, and they come from a background they're from Estonia, and they were very kind of like, they have different way of approaching issues than me, right? They're very, very direct, super direct, and I struggled with the culture a bit at the beginning. I worked with like direct people in the Netherlands, but this is like very different, or Americans, but this was a complete new mindset I had to be in. The way they speak sometimes makes you feel like, oh, they're super angry. They're shouting at me. It's like, actually, no, that's how they speak. They're just being direct. They just don't take it the wrong way. I still remember like the first conversation I had like with now a friend. He was running product marketing and he was like talking to me. It's like, fuck, this guy hates me. Now I'm a friend with him, but he's like, he was super angry. So the way they speak in English and the way I speak in English wasn't always there. It's the second language for both of us. So at the beginning, the cultural differences were there, but I think at the end of the day, we got along.
What was the project or moment where you felt like you've got the respect?
I think like early on, like 2 weeks in, I got thrown into like, hey, there's a board meeting happening and we need to show, it was like end of the year and we were supposed to share like the plan for the following year. Like as it normally happens, it was like October, November timeframe and we had to present the plan for the following year. So I just threw myself in and created like the model for the following year without knowing SaaS at all. I haven't worked in SaaS before. I didn't know what was a gross retention number or subscription monthly and annual, or what do you mean? What's the sign up? What's the conversion rate? All these kind of things that SaaS companies look at. So I worked hard to create something that could bring some insights to the leadership team. So I say, okay, if we want to grow this much, these are the underlying drivers that need to happen. So I created like a driver tree model where I say, okay, you want this number of revenue? This is P times Q, and P is this, and Q is this, and blah, 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 blah. So broken down the problem into smaller chunkable bits and presenting that with like some economics behind it was, I think, the first moment I started to get some respect.
So you were hired to do business operations by people who didn't really know what business operation is like. So they have like this, who is this person? What is he doing? Why is he sending us presentation, asking us super intimate questions?
Why is he in London?
Why is he in London?
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you are new to the role, new to the company, new to the industry, and you have to come up with something, with a deliverable that has value. Like I can see the abyss.
Yeah.
So what is business operations? What value can it give to companies? And then we'll maybe zoom out and speak about operations in general, but kind of like set the scene for your function and what you did.
Yeah. I started thinking as an internal strategy team, or trying to piggyback on my consulting background and say, okay, at the end of the day, we need to report to the board what we're going to do next year and how we're going to do it, how we're going to track it, and risks, and the kind of the classic example of a deck I could have created back in my consulting days, right? So I started thinking about a story. Like I like decks as stories, and started the first thing I do, I write it in an email and say, okay, what's the story we're going to tell the board? Okay, we're growing like this, we hit this milestone, we're going to do this, that, and that, and this is how we're going to do it, right? So I wrote down my story and I started to create the slides and the analysis behind it. And I guess business operations is a bit like that. So it's leveraging data internally to come up with insights that drive the business forward. And that may sound like a mouthful, and I haven't even thought about that, but it came like that before. So at the end of the day, like this tech companies have a lot of data. We of course, you know what the customers are doing in the product, or how you're selling, or how is the business going. The board is, of course, at a different level of understanding of the business and how much they need to know. If you're able to bridge that gap and come up with like, what are the things that actually matter and what are the things we're going to use to track those things that matter, that's, I think, where you can add value and talk to the right people and put like initiatives in place or program management teams in place to track those initiatives. So I think, in essence, you're like an internal consultant, a strategy consultant internally at a startup, leveraging data as I'm used to, but also speaking the language of the board and the decision makers. That's where the bridge you're building from the analysts that are all day like coding in SQL and coming up with tableaus and reports and whatever, up to what does it matter for the kind of like the investor, right? So you're that connection.
So making sense of the data, reducing the uncertainty that comes in the world of startups, maybe facilitating or a decision-making process with data. Now, at that point, to recap, you had the experience as a consultant, taking really abstract matters and distilling it in a way that makes sense for senior leaders. You had the right value set coming from LinkedIn. LinkedIn values like act like an owner, so adapting to what does the business think like, and then assume positive intent. It's another thing that LinkedIn was big about. Was like, if someone sounds angry, it's maybe their communication style, not necessarily because they are angry. Like try and be as empathic and compassionate as you can be. So you had all of this going for you. You knew how to deliver for them. Given all of that, it sounds like it's a fairy tale story. But, knowing startups, I'm sure it wasn't. So what was the hard part? When did it start being hard?
I guess like when you're trying to, as I told you just now, you're trying to bring the so what to the investor, right? What's the answer to their, are we growing as fast as we could? Why are we not growing more? Or when are we going to reach profitability? Or do we need to reach profitability? Do we want to do growth more or become profitable? Or high level questions. It's very hard to translate that to other parts of the business who are already operating in a way that nobody asked them those questions before, right? So if you look at Pipedrive, had a bunch of very capable individual contributors that were working in their particular area, and they were specialists and were very good on the data side, on the marketing side, product marketing side. But someone needs to optimize the system and not the subsystems, right? It's my boss back in the day, she used to call it like that. Like, we're optimizing for subsystems, but nobody's looking at the system overall. To give you a stupid example, like there's a web team that is capturing people into the product. They call it like a sign up, right? They go into the product and that team is looking at how good the web is doing because they're capturing leads, as every marketing team, capturing leads. There's another team that then looks at how good those leads are. And if those leads are not very good, they can do very little to make them become customers. But that team is looking at the next one and say like, guys, you're sending me shit. Like, stop doing that. And the other guys are, no, I'm doing my job.
Yeah, I've got the conversion rate.
Exactly. So if someone is looking at, okay, let's optimize for the whole customer journey and see, like, we all want to grow. We all want to get more customers and more revenue. So how do we make the incentives in a way, it wasn't even tied to compensation. That's even, like, it was just the fact that the teams were super well executors on their own area. But someone needed to tie everything back to the overall big picture. So that's kind of the role I was trying to play sometimes. And whenever things were not according to plan or whatever things were going ahead of plan, we needed to answer back the question, why? Like, why is it not good? Why is it good?
I see a few problems or challenges in that situation is because you have a lot of the responsibility, but not a whole lot of the authority.
Yes.
So these are individual contributors who are doing their job and doing it well.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you have to like tell them to do it differently.
Yes.
And doing it differently means also doing it maybe seeing some of the matrix deep.
Now you're hitting the nail on the head. I think it's at LinkedIn, we called it influencing without authority, right? It was very hard, especially being remote. I was in London and most of this team was in Tallinn. They have been there for years, measuring something, right? Measuring whatever metric.
Working towards optimizing some of these metrics for literally years. And you're remote, they've never met you. You're the first business operations person in the company. So they don't necessarily understand your role. And all of a sudden, this Felix guy who speaks with an accent we've never heard before in our life, I'm waking up in the morning and have emails for him telling me to do something differently.
Yeah.
I can see where the resistance might come from.
Yes. And I guess like I needed to bring people along, right? I had to handhold and I need to convince. It was a very much of a change management kind of thing. So for a particular part of the business that wasn't doing great at some point, I created like a SWAT team, or a cross-functional team,
SWAT,
like a task force, right?
SWAT as in strength, weakness.
No,
So SWAT like
SWAT,
as in
like
like
SWAT,
machine
like
guns
the US,
climbing up the windows.
like
Okay.
a very like a it's a military analogy, but it's like a task force, right?
Okay,
A
got
small cross-functional team. And with that, I think I managed to first and split into two phases. One is like a diagnostic, and the second one is recommendation and action plan. Classic consultancy. Like if you look at a proposal from all the consultancies, they're always around gap analysis or diagnostic, and then what's the plan to close that gap. I did the same thing. So I went and spent like 2 weeks over there, talked to everyone, and trying to understand, look, like even though this might be worse because of what you say in your business, in your kind of like silo, overall it's better. Like maybe we're converting less customers than before, but those which are converting are better because they are more likely to stay and they're more likely to buy more. So overall, their revenue overall is higher than 100 guys spending $1, and getting you one guy that's spending $200.
And that's not something you would see overnight.
No.
Right? Implementing changes to a marketing funnel, acquiring the customer, seeing how they get onboarded, how they use the product, and then you have to wait sometimes 3 months to see if your assumption paid off. And in these 3 months, the metrics might be dipping again. So we were speaking earlier about 1 degree of freedom, but it sounds like you had to sell your job, you had to build relationship with the founding team, and you had to build authority and base your authority with the people whose processes you were trying to optimize. What did it feel like when you met resistance? What did it look like?
It didn't look very well. I was like, how do I make my point? Am I right as well? Like at the beginning, I didn't know if what I was pushing for was the right solution either. Like that's also good to check, right? So if I wasn't right, I was before I pushed for something, I wanted to make sure I was right. So I run the numbers or do some benchmarking, do some calls with experts, and give me a little bit of confidence first of what I'm pushing for is what I think is the best thing for the business. And then second is like a bit of a peeling the onion and going first with the people who you think are more likely to think like you and therefore become your partners, right, in this change management program. So this person I was telling you before, running product marketing, at the beginning he was like, I felt like he was my enemy. He was like shouting at me, but I got along with him so much that then he was my go-to person. It's like, look, I saw that, I don't know, HubSpot did this, and like SurveyMonkey did this, and this other did that, and whatever. Why don't we first assess this in a small group? And I got his ideas, my ideas, and we got to a place where we were happy with the outcome. So he was then my ambassador with the local team or with others, and he was seen as someone very respectful in the company because he was there from the early days. So I bought myself an ally, a very strong ally. And then I bought another one, and then suddenly we're all on the same boat. But I think one-on-one time also made me change my answer as well. I wasn't perfectly right at the beginning. It was like, in the ballpark. And then I got more into the specifics. I got an understanding of what would the challenges be of that implementation. What would people ask? What would people say no to? And adapting my speech to that made me, I guess, more successful in the one-to-many forums.
It's in startups everywhere. You see it a lot. Sometimes it's more important who says it than what is being said.
Yeah.
It's such a huge point, and it takes a lot of humility to say, actually, maybe I'm not the right person to say that, even though I am 100% right.
Yeah.
It's a lesson I think you have to learn the hard way, because this is how you understand the power dynamics in a startup. And it gets all the harder when you're working remotely.
Yeah.
Your time with your decision makers is limited. It's via Zoom calls or whatever.
Yeah.
Makes it all the more harder. So you got to a point where you were starting to hit your stride, you gathered your allies, you're all on the same boat. Did it start falling apart then, later? Was it an outcome of an external force or internal? What did it feel like when things were starting to, break apart?
I guess like there are a couple of factors. Like maybe I spend a lot of time trying to build that buy-in with the individual contributors or the peers and their teams. Like, and not as much time understanding, for instance, the board or the executive team, who had very strong opinions on the issue we were trying to tackle at the time. So I got to a place where everyone in that task force was very happy with the output of that task force. We ended up presenting that to the leadership team, went to the board and everything. But at the end of the day, my learning was that I didn't do that same effort of getting everyone in agreement with the people above as I did with the people like peer and below, right? I was very much worried about the analysts thinking, oh, this guy is measuring conversion the wrong way, than what the board member thought. An oversight, clearly, like now in hindsight looks stupid, but I missed that. And before embarking in this project, I actually thought that this board member had a real genuine question about what had happened, but actually he had an opinion already, which I didn't ask about. I didn't kind of like get an understanding of. So I guess even though my work, I was happy with the end product, I never kind of like answered or went back to or made the board member click with that. And then also like my boss started to have disagreements with how things were handled. And I guess we decided to leave. And that was like when things decided like not to fall apart. It was like, I don't agree with the way how to run this. And we I don't know, we broke apart. I don't know how to say it. Yeah.
So the idea of knowing what's important to your managers, as a manager, you already knew that.
Yeah.
So you understood that and you valued that in your directs. But then changing the environments, changing the way you communicate with your decision makers, with the executives, also changed your ability or affected your ability to implement that learning. So you already knew that. This is not a new lesson.
Yeah.
Right? But when you take into consideration time, that is the most valuable resource in startups, time, not money, it's time. And when you realize that your core role, in order to start doing business operations, you had to prove who you are, you have to get buy-in internally, up and down and sideways. I mean, there's only so much you can achieve in that space of time.
Yeah.
And when you're running so fast, you're bound to miss out on things you already know.
Yeah.
Probably painful, like, I know that. I already know that. Like,
I guess like at LinkedIn, like it was all very structured, and whenever there was projects or decisions or whatever, I always felt like if I had the agreement of my manager, and that's as far as I should go above to, like, because she would do the job above from her, right? When you go into startups, when there's like a different dynamic, there's a board, there's a VC, you need to pour money into this, you're losing money or you're growing or whatever. There's like a different kind of like set of kind of like spices in that food that you haven't tried before. That was the first time I was in such a small company where I didn't know exactly who was making the decision. And I learned that the wrong way, right? I thought that the decisions were made like what I recommended, what my manager said, like, let's go. But there was like a superpower someone had somewhere that said, no. I wish I had learned that the other way, but I realized that this super hand that came after the fact, I never planned for that.
Yeah. How would you advise people to prepare for such scenarios in their environment?
I don't want to, like, maybe it was one particular set of individuals or one type of board or one type of VC. I don't know how, like I have a few startups experience, but I don't have like enough sample to generalize. But I would say, like, ask questions and say, what are we going to do with this, the output of this? This is my final decision, my final recommendation, and this needs to go somewhere else to get approved. Who holds the decision power of this? Is it me? Is it my boss? Or is it the board? And then whoever that person ends up being, like, ask what they would like to get out of this, like, project or whatever, because probably I wasn't in the same line of thought as this person.
Startups can be tricky in that way because Sometimes you're expected, unlike LinkedIn, where you mentioned you need permission to do this side project. In startups, you don't need to ask for permission. You need to like do it, and then worst case apologize. But it's not always the case, huh? It's kind of a myth, or it's an approach that works sometimes, but backfires other times. So you took that learning,
Yeah.
and you moved on, and now you're working for a company called Mural.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about your role in Mural and why you chose that company and how you implemented some of what you've learned there, what you learned in Pipedrive, and brought it into Mural with you.
Yeah, definitely. So after Pipedrive, I decided to take some time off, do some consulting work, because at some point I thought this go-to-market experience of like scaling a product-led organization like Pipedrive and expanding their capabilities into marketing and sales and it seems to be a tricky point in startups or scale-ups or whatever you want to call it, right? It seems to be that distribution becomes an issue for some of these companies who had a lot of like momentum, early adopters, they grow very crazily at the beginning, they have an amazing product, and then someone pours money into them and say, grow 100%, right? I felt there was a need of someone or some kind of like capacity of agency or kind of consulting work to help companies scale. And I really enjoyed that time at Pipedrive, and doing that inside a company was very meaningful for me. Problem solving, impact, all the kind of things I like. I felt like at some point I could do that like for a living and changing from company to company and be exposed to different companies. So at some point I thought about that as my own business with my ex-boss and thought about running like an actual business, a consulting company.
Can I pause here for 1 second? Because I wanted to ask and I forgot. You've left the dream job and the best position you've ever been in professionally to take a big risk with a startup. You've done some things right, some things wrong, but it didn't end the way you wanted. It wasn't the outcome you planned on.
Yeah.
Where were you physically, mentally, financially at that point in time?
Good question. I was very, very stressed. So I thought I had done a big mistake for some days. And for some days I thought, no, maybe this was the right thing. I got super stressed out. I had like a thing with my gallbladder, and my wife makes the joke, or not the joke, but she believes a lot in the zodiac signs and the Chinese yin yoga mentality. I'm supposed to be the element of wood, and wood, all their issues are with the gallbladder. And she said like you're doing like what the book says. So I got super stressed, and this was like a month before. And even like I went straight to there's two CEOs at Pipedrive and said, look guys, like I don't think we're getting to a place we were. I talked directly and frankly with them as well. Like going back to the transparency point, I was always very open and honest with them. Like, I don't think this is working. I don't think you're getting the value of this. Like if I do all this job and you decide to do something else, maybe you don't need me. Maybe you don't need a strategy person. You know your strategy. And whatever I recommend you will end up doing whatever you want to do. That's fine, but don't hire me for someone who does strategy. So going back to, I was super stressed, and financially, I was also very worried. And luckily, I have a network of ex-consultants, ex-people at Bain. I started to talk to a lot of them. It's like, hey guys, if there's any work that I could do or like on the side. So I started to get connected in ex-consultants, freelancers. So I had like lined up a few projects in case this fall apart a month in advance. I had something already planned. So financially that gave me because I say, okay, I have that plan B. And personally, I was kind of like half and half. Like this was an intense year. I learned a lot. But other part of me was like, why did you leave LinkedIn? You should have stayed. So I was torn. I was very much torn. And also London for me is a city that showed me a lot of opportunities, a lot of stuff. But at the same time, I was like, what am I doing in London now without a job? I came for a job. I don't have that job anymore. My kids are at school. Should I stay? Should I go? I don't know. So I started to balance everything out, and it was super stressful, in short.
Especially because some of the work you've done, you were proud of professionally. You did the right things.
I think so, yeah.
but it still didn't work out. And I think this is the nightmare part of startups sometimes, because, in LinkedIn, 9 times out of 10, you do the work the right way, you'll get, it might take 6 months, a year longer than you thought, but you will get ahead. And in startups, it doesn't guarantee a whole lot. The startup can go bust. Two CEOs for a startup, it's already hard making decisions. So what do you do with that dynamic?
Yeah.
Like you end up alienating one of them. Like, woof, like this is.
And for the first time in my career, I started to fear the fact of having a job, right? So that's something that maybe sounds stupid for other people, but I was lucky in my previous jobs that I never felt that I could lose my job. I am lucky, I know that. Some people may be in a different position. But I was always like, I left Bain because I wanted. I left LinkedIn because I wanted a new challenge. I left my consulting background because I wanted to do an MBA. It was always my decision. I had the power. But for the first time, I was like feeling that my work wasn't cutting through. It's like, are these guys going to fire me? Are they like, my boss is maybe leaves, and what am I going to do? They hired someone who had a very similar title than me, who was an ex-friend of one of the CEOs in New York, close to one of the CEOs. It's like, I started to join the dots, and it's like, wait, there's another guy who has my same title. He reports into one of the CEOs. My boss maybe is not here in a month. I need to start thinking about the plan B. So that was the worst time, like 2 months before I left, when I made that connection, that I decided like maybe I should plan B, or more than plan B. My plan A should be leave.
Wow, that's harsh.
But again, I learned a lot. I learned how to read people, how to trust my feelings. I trust my gut. Like at the beginning, I felt like there was something in there that I couldn't connect with one of the members of the leadership team. And that ended up being what stopped me from progressing and moving forward. So you ask me a lot, like advice for others, like trust your gut. Like my gut was telling me, this is never going to work with this individual. Try to work it, but it doesn't go through. Maybe you're not the right fit for that company, and that's okay.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. It resembles my personal experience and so many other people's experience. There is delegitimization of failure, or like even not understanding what failure is, because I hear your story and I don't consider it a failure, but you experienced it as a failure in real time. Maybe I've done a mistake. I need to provide for but no, that's not a failure. It's, if you said about respecting the journey, then this is the journey.
Yeah,
this is the journey. I want to lighten the mood a little bit, and I heard a myth about you a few years ago. I don't know if it's true or not, but I think it speaks to your character a little bit. Is it true that when you first moved to London, you did stand-up comedy to improve your English?
Yes. Oh my God. Who's your source? Yes, I did. Going back to the consulting times, you get a lot of feedback all the time. And full transparency, when I applied for Bain, I was in business school. There was, I think it was over 160 people who applied for a position, right? So you get down to the first interview, I think we were 70. Second interview, like, I don't know, like 25 or 30. And then we were all waiting to hear by end of day on a Friday. And I hear there's 5 people who gets offers. And I still don't hear anything back. And they call me like the last minute they could possibly call me, which was the time and the deadline. And they said, we really liked you. There's someone in the team who thinks your English is not good enough. It's like, fuck. So you give me a good news and a bad news. And then I started doubting a lot about my English, of course. Like that made my English worse, of course, overnight or in a second. And they said, but the guys who liked you think that you could be very good. So we want to put you in front of the partner who runs recruiting globally for Bain. And you need to come to London to see her. It's like, okay. And in my head, I had the next week, when you're doing MBA, you're also very stressed. I had lost like 10 kilos. I was stressed because I had a big debt. Argentinian pesos in euros don't translate very well normally. So I was like spending all my savings and debt and personal and family loans on my MBA, betting for something. And now that bet was relying on me speaking English, for fuck's sake. So I was super stressed, and I had all interviews every day, and they told me, and I was thinking the only day I cannot make it to London was on Wednesday. And she tells me, the recruiter tells me, the only day that she can meet you, Wednesday. Of course. Of course. So I had to go to London for the day, but that day I had like interviews with McKinsey in the morning and with another company in the afternoon. So I woke up like at 5:30, went to McKinsey interviews at 8 a.m. I took a train from Fontainebleau to Paris to London, whatever. I got to 3:30 interview. Luckily, the time difference was helping me, working me out. I got a final interview and I got the role. But my confidence was destroyed in that sense. So when I got into Bain, the first day I was all the time like, oh, these guys all speak great English. It's full of Americans, Canadians, British, or even like French people were perfect at English. It's like, fuck, I'm the worst. And then I started to get on the projects, and sometimes there was some commentary around my English, like always. Like when you write your tone or when you say this or whatever, when you're speaking with very senior people and sometimes speaking about very strategic things, like, I don't know, dismissals or firings or whatever, the tone is critical. And to be honest, I wasn't that great with my English back then, probably, and still aren't, but I was worse then. So at some point I think I need a place to start talking, in English where nobody's judging me. And I can just be myself and, I don't know, make stupid jokes. And I did 2 courses of comedy, stand-up comedy to do that. Long story, but yeah, you're right.
So you used to actually go on stage to like tell jokes?
Yes. But it's more the process. Like it was like an 8-week course where you go and you meet with other people and you work on your material and you work on techniques and you learn from a comedian or from someone running the workshop. And it was pretty good. It was also fun.
Fun is a word that came back when you first spoke about LinkedIn and your aspiration to be on planes and stuff like that. And I think part of what helps the antidote to the startup nightmares could sometimes be fun.
Yeah.
In many, many ways, kind of light that fire inside of us again. Felix, this has been a true pleasure. I've learned so much and I've been waiting to have this conversation with you for I don't know how long, but timing is everything. Thank you so much for your insights. Where should people go to learn more about what you do, what Mural does?
Well, Mural is just mural.co. You can probably see what the product is. It's an online whiteboard where like we help design thinking scale. Right? There's a lot of value in applying design thinking methodologies to problem solving. Again, going back to my heart. So we use this tool, which is like a whiteboard where people from around the different places can collaborate on a project, can brainstorm, can ideate. And I think it's a fantastic tool to foster visual collaboration. I'm, as I told you, someone who thinks in spreadsheets, but now I'm trying to be a little bit more creative and I draw on an iPad or I draw, and I think it's helping a side of me become a bit more mature. And therefore, like you can see on my LinkedIn, I try to write stuff here and there. I'm doing this also because I also like to share what is working in startups, what is not, what should people expect in startups, what not. I think you had sent me a couple of ideas a couple of months ago of myths that are in startups. I think we need to be more open and talk more about it and talk about this is not a failure. This is just something that happened and it was learning for me. And if you were in a job for 9 months, it didn't work out, that's fine. It's no longer the case where you look at a resume and you see someone changing jobs after 9 months. That's always a bad sign. So I guess thank you for having me. I think you're kind of like communicate that idea of like startup world is different than the traditional world. So I appreciate you trying to promote that idea, that learning, that thinking, and thanks for having me here.
It's been our utmost pleasure. Can't wait to have you back on season 2. Good luck to you. Good luck to Mural.
Thank you, Tal.